The wind howled like a wounded animal across the open plains, tugging at the old shutters on Abigail Monroe's ranch house. The fog rolled thick and low, swallowing everything beyond the front porch. There were no stars, no moon, just white breath rising and the sharp crackle of frost under boot soles. Abby stood at the wood stove in her kitchen, wrapping her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders. She hadn't planned to be up this late, but something about the night felt off, restless, like the world was holding its breath. She reached for the kettle when the knock came. Not a tap, not a polite visitor's knock. 3 heavy, desperate pounds. She froze. No one came out this way after dark. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles north and didn't ride after sundown. And no traveler with sense wandered these hills in November unless they were running from something or had nowhere else to go. Abby stepped toward the front door and paused, grabbing the shotgun from behind the coat rack. Her heart pounded in her ears. With every step, the knock seemed to echo deeper in her bones. Another knock, then a voice, hoarse, ragged male. "Ma'am, I don't mean no harm. We just need a place to sleep. Somewhere warm enough not to die." That stopped her cold. She pushed open the door, slowly, barrel-first lamp in the other hand. Fog spilled over the porch. Out of the white, a tall figure appeared, holding something, no, 2 somethings, tight against his chest. Bundles, wrapped in blankets. Infants. Abby's eyes widened. The man removed his hat. Beneath the dirt and stubble, he had hollow cheeks, tired eyes, and a look that said he hadn't slept in days. The babies in his arms whimpered tiny sounds swallowed by the wind. "I'm sorry to come this late," he said. "Walked all day. They're freezing. I ain't asking for charity. Just a place to lay 'em down till morning. A barn, a shed, anywhere off the wind." Abby glanced past him into the dark. No horse, no wagon, just mud-caked boots and a worn satchel over his shoulder. "What's your name?" she asked, keeping the gun steady. Caleb Walker. These are my boys, Luke and Levi." He looked like a man used to hearing no, but still praying for yes. Abby's mind raced. A stranger, 2 children. Her ranch was isolated and she lived alone. Her father had died 2 winters ago, and her mother not long after. Folks already whispered about her being too proud to marry, too stubborn to leave. And now a desperate man wanted in her yard, her world, her silence. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "The barn's out back," she said, finally, voice even. "Dry straw and some wool blankets in the corner. I don't let strangers in the house." Caleb's shoulders dropped in relief. He didn't argue. "Thank you, ma'am. I swear we'll be gone by first light." He turned and disappeared into the fog, the faint sound of a baby coughing trailing behind. Abby closed the door and leaned against it, gun still in hand. She didn't move for a long time. That night, the silence of the house pressed in like a weight. The fire crackled, but it couldn't warm the unease settling in her chest. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her chipped cup of coffee, her hands clenched around the ceramic like it could anchor her. She'd survived 2 winters alone, fought off wolves, patched fences in sleet, buried her own parents with no one but wind for company. But those babies, those tiny cries. She stood abruptly, grabbed her lamp, and walked to the window. The barn stood at the edge of the fog, its silhouette barely visible in the lantern glow. She imagined them inside on the ground, wrapped in thin blankets, cold creeping into their bones. Something about the way that man held them. She bit her lip. No, she told herself. He's a stranger. He could be dangerous. You can't just... A sharp gust rattled the window. She cursed under her breath. 5 minutes later, she was outside, boots crunching frost coat over her nightdress, a wool shawl wrapped tight. Her lamp cast a pale halo through the fog as she reached the barn and opened the door with a creak. Inside, the scene hit her like a kick to the chest. Caleb sat against the haystack, back to the wall, both babies curled in his arms beneath his coat. He was awake, rocking slightly, humming something faint and broken like a memory. His eyes met hers, startled. Ma'am Abby stepped forward and extended her arms. "Give me the babies." He blinked. "Ma'am, I said give me the babies. You're coming inside." He hesitated. "I won't sleep tonight knowing there's 2 babies shivering out here." Caleb stared at her like she was something he couldn't quite believe. He stood slowly, legs stiff, and passed Luke and Levi to her, with the kind of care that made her throat tighten. She cradled them instinctively, one in each arm. He followed her through the dark into the warmth of her kitchen, where the fire still glowed low in the stove. She laid the babies down on the thick quilt she spread out by the fire. Caleb sank to his knees beside them, hands hovering like he couldn't stop protecting them even now. Abby fetched another blanket, set out a kettle for hot water, and said quietly, "We'll talk in the morning." Caleb nodded. "Thank you, ma'am. You don't know what this means." She didn't respond, just stared into the flames as the cold fog curled around the windows, held at bay by wood warmth and one strange twist of fate. The fire still glowed in the hearth, throwing soft orange light against the worn floorboards. Abby sat at the edge of her kitchen table, elbows on the wood eyes, on the man stretched out on the braided rug beside the fire. Caleb lay on his side, one arm around his boys, their tiny chests rising and falling beneath a thick quilt. He didn't move, not even as the old stovepipe popped and hissed behind them. It was nearly 3 in the morning, but Abby knew there'd be no sleep tonight. Not with the wind still pushing at the corners of the house. Not with her shotgun still leaning by the door. Not with a stranger and his children asleep on her floor. She rose quietly and walked to the kitchen sink, filled a tin mug with cold well water, and took a long sip. Her hands trembled, but she wasn't sure if it was the chill or the weight of what she'd just done. This wasn't like her. She was the kind of woman who said no more often than yes, who turned down marriage offers with a half smile and didn't explain herself, who spent 3 winters alone on her father's land, ignoring every knock on her door unless it came from someone with tools or seed to trade. And yet here she was, letting in a man she didn't know, letting him sleep beside her fire, letting his babies breathe her air. Abby walked to the fire and crouched down, careful not to wake them. Luke, she thought it was Luke, had a tiny fist balled near his cheek, dark lashes dusted across red, round cheeks. He looked warm now, safe. She exhaled slowly. "I won't sleep tonight knowing there's 2 babies shivering out there." That's what she'd told him. And it was true. Still true. She adjusted the quilt just slightly, tucking it in tighter around the boys. Caleb stirred, then eyes fluttering open, unfocused, then sharpening as they met hers. Sorry," he whispered, sitting up halfway. "Didn't mean to drift off like that." "They're fine," she replied, voice low. "You all are." He blinked slowly, then looked toward the stove as if the heat itself was too generous to believe in. "I meant what I said. We'll be gone by sunrise. I appreciate what you've done. More than I can say." She shook her head and moved back to the table, grabbing her cup again. "You won't go anywhere with those babies in the state they're in. Not until you've eaten. Not until the frost breaks." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he also looked like he hadn't eaten properly in days. "You got a name, Mr. Caleb." Caleb Walker, and you weren't lying about the boys." He smiled just a little. "No, ma'am. Luke and Levi, 6 months old, born under the last cold moon." She raised an eyebrow. "And their mother?" His mouth twitched. Not quite a frown, not quite a grimace. "Passed. 3 months ago." Silence. Abby didn't ask more. She could see the grief sitting behind his eyes like a loaded cart. Heavy, uneven, always there. She let the quiet fill the room as she set a small pot on the stove and scooped in oats from a barrel near the wall. She added milk and a pinch of salt, then stirred slowly. The kitchen smelled faintly of smoke earth and now oatmeal. Behind her, Caleb watched, but didn't speak. He rocked slightly, calming one of the boys as they stirred, still half asleep. When the porridge was thick, she ladled it into 2 tin bowls and slid one toward him on the table. "Eat. You look like a stiff wind would knock you over." Caleb hesitated for only a second before sitting across from her. He bowed his head slightly, not quite a prayer, not quite a thank you, then began to eat. Every few bites he paused, eyes flicking toward the twins, as if checking they were still breathing. "Where you headed?" she asked after a while. "Anywhere that ain't back. That's not an answer." He chewed slowly, then said north. "Maybe Colorado. Maybe Montana. Somewhere I can find work. Raise 'em right." "And you thought walking across Wyoming with 2 infants in November was a good plan?" He gave a low laugh. "Didn't have a plan, to be honest. Just a reason." That quieted her again. She knew something about moving because staying hurt too much. About losing so much that forward was the only direction that didn't burn. Abby sipped her coffee and looked him over, not just his gaunt face or calloused hands, but the set of his shoulders. The way he stayed small by the fire. Like he didn't want to take up space. Like he didn't believe he had a right to it. "You any good with fence lines?" He looked up. "Ma'am, or chickens, or tending a root cellar, or wrangling stubborn mules?" He blinked. "Yes, ma'am. Grew up working land. Ain't nothing I won't do if it means keeping my boys fed." She nodded once. "There's a bunkhouse out back. Needs sweeping. Roof leaks a little. You fix it and we'll talk." Caleb put down his spoon. "You offering me work?" "I'm offering you a place to stay for a while. Temporary. Until you get your feet under you." His face tightened with something like disbelief, then fear, then relief so fast it made her chest ache. "I won't let you regret it," he said softly. "You will if you slack off," she shot back. They both smiled. A small, tired peace settled between them. As the first pale light began to spread across the edge of the hills outside, Abby cleared the dishes and rinsed them. Caleb gathered his boys, now fully awake and softly cooing, and wrapped them close. Luke chewed on his collar. Levi stared at the fire like it told stories only he could hear. "Can I fix anything before I get started out back?" Caleb asked. She paused, looked at the frayed curtain, the creaky window, the half-chopped firewood on the porch. "Chop the rest of the logs first," she said. "Then sweep the bunkhouse and patch that roof. There's tar in the shed." "Yes, ma'am." As he turned toward the back door, she said, "And Caleb?" He looked over his shoulder. "Don't call me ma'am. What should I call you, Abby?" He nodded once, like that name meant something now, like it had weight. Then he stepped out into the cold morning, the door clicking shut behind him. She watched the fire a little longer, rubbing the warmth into her palms. Something was shifting, and for the first time in a long while she didn't mind it. By the time the sun had fully risen, the Monroe Ranch looked deceptively calm. The early chill began to lift, burning off the fog that had swallowed the hills at dawn. Chickens scratched at the dry earth. The mule bleated once from the small corral. The woodpile by the house now stood stacked, neat, even. Someone who didn't know better might have thought things had always been this steady. But inside Abby Monroe's chest, a different storm was building. She stood by the window with a tin mug in hand, watching Caleb hammer down a patch on the bunkhouse roof. He'd already swept it out, hung blankets over the windows, and set a basket of supplies she'd brought outside the door. The man moved like he had something to prove. She admired that, more than she wanted to. She didn't notice the dust trail on the road until it got close enough for her to hear hooves. A rider. Not many people visited unannounced, especially not by horseback, especially not her. By the time the chestnut mare came into full view and stopped in front of the house, Abby had set her coffee down and opened the front door. She stepped onto the porch just as the rider dismounted. "Morning," Abby said, arms crossed. The woman pulled off her riding gloves slowly. She wore a practical gray skirt, a heavy brown coat, and a wide-brimmed hat pinned neatly in place. Her face was flushed from the ride and maybe something more. "Is it true?" the woman asked. Abby didn't flinch. "Good to see you too, Ethel." Miss Ethel Sanderson had been a fixture in the community since Abby was a little girl. She'd run the local school for years, led church bake sales, and volunteered to deliver food baskets in every bad winter. She also had a tongue sharp enough to flay bark off a tree. "You're taking in strangers now, Abby." In this town, Abby looked down at her boots, then back up with quiet steel. "Not taking anyone in. Letting someone stay. Temporarily. While he finds his footing." Ethel's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer and dropped her voice. "Is that him?" she asked, nodding toward Caleb, who hadn't noticed them yet, still fixing the roof. "That's him." Ethel turned back, lips pursed. "You know what folks'll say? They say something every time I do anything that ain't sewing lace," Abby said flatly. "Let them talk." Ethel didn't argue right away. She walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the bunkhouse. Her tone softened just a hair. "You've done well for yourself. After your folks passed, most thought you'd sell and move into town. You didn't. You held this place together." Abby said nothing. Ethel sighed. "All I'm saying is, you don't want to give them more reason to question your judgment." "And what's your judgment say?" Ethel turned to her. "My judgment says if that man laid hands on a child the way he laid hands on that roof, you're probably in good company. But you should know, word's already out." Abby's stomach tightened. How old Sam Whitlow saw him walking in yesterday. Said he was carrying 2 babies and looked like he'd been dragged behind a horse. Abby felt the heat rising in her neck. He walked 20 miles with twin boys on foot. Ethel's expression shifted just a flicker. Something like respect or pity. They're his. And the mother passed, he said 3 months ago." Ethel crossed her arms. "That'll raise eyebrows too. A man with no wife showing up with 2 infants asking for a roof. You know how people get." "I do." Ethel took off her hat and wiped her forehead. "Listen, I didn't ride out here to scold you." No, she said, sighing. "I rode out to see if you're okay, and to bring you this." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small wrapped bundle, bread and jerky still warm. Abby took it, surprised. "I made too much. Figured someone new around here might need feeding." Abby's face softened. "Thank you." Ethel put her hat back on and stepped down off the porch. "You just be careful. People around here don't forget what they see, and they never forget what they think they saw. She mounted her mare. Keep your chin up, and if you need anything, I mean anything, Abby, you send for me, I will. Ethel rode off, the dust curling behind her like a ribbon. Abby stood there a moment longer, then turned to go back inside. Only Caleb was standing at the foot of the porch, holding both boys. He'd heard everything. I can go, he said quietly, if it's already causing you trouble. No, Abby said too fast. She looked away, then met his eyes. No one who matters is troubled. I told you I didn't come here to make things harder. You didn't. Caleb shifted his weight. She's right, though. Small towns remember everything. I've lived in this town my whole life. They still don't know me. He looked down at his sons, then back up. I'd understand if you wanted to reconsider your offer. I'm used to folks thinking the worst. Well, Abby said, I'm not most folks. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The boys gurgled, reaching for each other's hands. Finally, Abby gestured toward the house. You fed them yet? Just finished. You eat not yet. Then let's fix that. He followed her in. The warmth of the fire still lingered, and the smell of fresh bread from Ethel's bundle filled the kitchen. Caleb sat at the table while Abby split the loaf in half and ladled out what was left of the stew from the night before. He took a bite and closed his eyes. This is the best thing I've had in a long time. She smiled faintly. That's because it's not burnt. Caleb laughed. A real one this time. They ate in silence, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable. The kind that felt like maybe silence didn't always mean emptiness. After the meal, Caleb stood and said, I'll finish the south fence this afternoon. And then the henhouse door. It's loose, you don't have to do everything at once. He looked at her steadily. I want to. That caught her off guard more than anything else had. She nodded. All right. As he stepped out again with the boys bundled close in the sling across his chest, Abby leaned on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. Ethel was right. People would talk. But maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a story to be ashamed of. Maybe it was the beginning of one worth hearing. The boys were cooing, again happy warm. And Caleb, he walked with his back a little straighter now. That meant something. The day ended the way most did lately, quieter than it started. The last of the sun sank behind the ridge, throwing soft pink and amber light across the horizon. In its glow, the Monroe Ranch looked like something out of a dream, fences mended, smoke curling lazily from the chimney chickens settled in the coop, and a man sitting on the front porch polishing tools like he had always belonged there. Abby Monroe stood barefoot in the doorway, her arms crossed shoulder against the frame. She'd just finished washing dishes and laying the boys down for a nap in the cradle by the stove. Luke and Levi had been fussy all day, teething maybe, but had finally quieted under the warmth of fresh quilts and full bellies. She watched Caleb in the fading light. He worked with slow, even motions, knife in one hand, whetstone in the other, rhythm steady and sure. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing tanned arms marked with old scars and fresh scratches. She should have gone back inside, closed the door, let the quiet keep its distance. But something in her stayed. Knife won't do much with the stone that dry, she said at last. Caleb looked up, surprised. He held her gaze for a beat, then smiled softly. You're right. She walked over, handed him the canteen from the rail, and sat across from him on the top step. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them was still. Then she said, You never told me how she died. Caleb didn't flinch. Wasn't trying to hide it, he said quietly. Just, some things are hard to get right in words. You don't have to. He set the whetstone down. No. I think maybe I do. He looked out over the fields as he spoke. Sarah went into labor early. We were 2 hours from any real doctor. I thought I could ride for help in time, but he stopped, jaw tightening. I didn't make it back fast enough. Abby watched him closely. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. But he was unraveling inch by inch in the way only grief allows, quietly, stubbornly, without asking permission. They said it was my fault. Her family. The town. Said I shouldn't have taken her so far from people. From safety. Truth is, we didn't have much choice. Land was cheaper out there. I thought I could give her a better start. He exhaled slow and heavy. When they buried her, they wouldn't even let me speak. Abby's chest ached. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand on his. They were wrong, she said. Every last one of them. He didn't move, just stared at her hand, then finally turned his eyes up to hers. I should have done more. You did everything you could. He shook his head. Maybe, but there's a voice in my head that says I didn't. It's loud, all the time. She held his gaze. You're not broken, Caleb. You're just tired. He blinked. Once, then again. And then he laughed, just a breath of it. Surprised. Raw. No one said anything kind to me in a long time. She let her hand stay. I'm not always kind, she said. But I know what tired looks like. They sat there until the sky turned dark and the stars began to peek through the dusk. When the wind picked up, she finally stood. You want coffee? He nodded, still not quite smiling. Only if it's burnt. She smirked and turned toward the door. Inside, the boys had stirred again, one crying softly. Caleb stepped in behind her and moved toward them without being asked. He lifted Luke gently, rocking him with practiced ease. You've got a good hand with them, Abby said. I'm learning as I go. Looks like you've had to learn fast. He didn't answer that, but she saw the weight of it settle in his shoulders. By the time the coffee was poured and the cradle quiet again, they were seated at the kitchen table, the room lit by oil lamps and firelight. Abby wrapped her hands around her mug. I lost someone too, she said after a beat. Caleb looked up. My father first, then my mother 6 months later. Pneumonia took her fast. Too fast. She didn't often speak about them. Not because it hurt too much, but because no one had asked in so long. They left me this land, she continued, and a whole heap of debts and judgment from every man in town who thought a single woman had no business holding a deed. I've seen what you've done here, Caleb said softly. They don't know what they're talking about. They never do. Silence stretched again, but this one was warmer, thicker, like something healing. After a while, she said, This house has been quiet too long. Caleb nodded, glancing toward the cradle. Feels like it's waking up. Abby smiled faintly. Maybe we both are. The clock ticked quietly. The wind rustled the trees outside. Something in the air shifted, less tense, more expectant. I've got tools that need oiling tomorrow, she said, and the goats are getting restless. I'll take care of them. You don't have to. I want to. She looked at him closely. Why? He didn't blink. Because this is the first place in months that's made me feel like I'm not just passing through. She swallowed. That landed deeper than she expected. All right, she said. You're not passing through. Not yet. He smiled, then just a little. After he left for the bunkhouse, Abby sat alone by the fire. She didn't sew, didn't read, just sat there watching the flames curl and crackle. Her heart beat a little louder than usual. Maybe that was all right. The next morning came colder than expected. A hard frost had crept in overnight, leaving the ground silver and hard beneath their boots. Abby was in the barn feeding the mule when she heard the unmistakable sound of a wagon approaching. She stepped out, hay clinging to her sleeves, and squinted toward the road. Two figures, Uncle Virgil and Cousin Clyde. Her gut turned. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the house just as the wagon rolled in. They didn't wait for an invitation to dismount. Well, well, Virgil said, brushing off his coat. We figured you'd be long gone by now. I'm still here, Abby said, voice cold. Not for long, Clyde added, smirking. We need to talk, Abigail, about the land. Uncle Virgil always wore his hat like it was part of his skull, like God himself had set it there, and only death would remove it. He tipped it slightly as he stepped onto the porch, but the gesture lacked any true civility. Abby Monroe stood on the top step, her jaw tight, arms crossed. Her fingers were still dusted with feed from the barn. She hadn't had time to clean up, and she wouldn't have even if she had. Cousin Clyde slouched behind Virgil, boots, muddy eyes darting toward the bunkhouse where Caleb had paused mid-task. Abby could feel Caleb's stare, but she didn't look back at him. Not yet. I'm busy, she said flatly. Virgil ignored that. We need a word about the land. You had your chance years ago. You didn't want it then. Well, things change, Clyde said with a greasy smile. Especially now that it looks like you've got company. Virgil narrowed his eyes. That the one sleeping in the bunkhouse folks are talking Abigail. And I don't blame 'em. Let them, she said. Virgil stepped up a little closer, lowering his voice. A woman alone can't own 100 acres, not without a man to answer for it. Abby's eyes didn't blink. I've been answering for it just fine. Not according to the county assessor. There's a clause in your father's deed. I had it checked. He pulled a folded, dirt-smudged document from his coat and waved it once like it was a sheriff's badge. That land was passed to you with the understanding that a family member male would oversee it if you didn't marry within a reasonable time. Reasonable according to who? According to the law. And we're here to tell you we'll be filing a petition in town next week if this doesn't get straightened out. Straightened how she asked, though she already knew. You give over partial stewardship, Virgil said. Let us manage the estate. You stay on the land. Keep your house, even draw a share of the profits. But the deed transfers to the family. Abby's voice was calm, low. You want to run this ranch from your porch in town, better than letting some stranger, some drifter with a couple of sickly kids move in and play husband. Caleb stepped down from the porch of the bunkhouse. His pace was slow, deliberate. He didn't say a word. Virgil turned, slightly catching sight of him. There he is, the man himself. Tell me, boy, what's your interest here? Fixing what's broken, Caleb replied evenly, and staying out of what ain't mine. Virgil chuckled darkly. That's cute, but I've seen your kind before. Come in with empty hands and big promises. Next thing you know, the widow's got nothing left. I'm not a widow, Abby snapped. No, but it sure looks like you're fixing to be something close, Clyde added, smirking. You got 2 babies sleeping in your parlor and a man patching your roof. That walks like a duck cousin. Abby took a step forward, eyes fierce. This land is mine. It's in my blood and in every callus on these hands. I've worked it alone and I've kept it alive. You've barely kept it breathing, Virgil said, jaw clenched, until he showed up. And what's that tell you? Caleb interjected. That maybe you should have stepped in when she was burying fence posts in the snow instead of waiting until it looked worth stealing. Virgil bristled. Don't get high and mighty with me, stranger. You don't even have a name in this county. I've got 2 sons and a spine, Caleb said. That's more than I can say for some folks born here. Abby held up a hand. Enough. She turned to Virgil, voice calm again, but sharp as cut stone. You bring your papers. You bring your lawyer. I'll bring my proof. Proof of what? Clyde laughed. That this land isn't abandoned, that it's producing, that it's home, and that neither of you has lifted a damn finger to help it grow. Virgil's mouth flattened. Then you'll be hearing from the court. Then I'll be seeing you there. The 2 men turned without another word, climbed back onto their wagon, and rode off with the kind of retreat that didn't feel like a loss, just a pause. Abby didn't move until they were out of sight. When she finally did, she turned to Caleb, who was standing motionless, fists clenched. They'll file, won't they? He asked. Yeah, she said. They will. Caleb looked toward the pasture. The wind was picking up. And they've got legal grounds. Maybe Abby admitted. That clause is real. I remember Pa mentioning it once. Said it was foolish, but he signed anyway. Because they made it sound like a formality. Exactly. They both stood there, the weight settling over them like dust before a storm. You could fight it, he said. I plan to. But if they challenge it on marital status, Abby looked at him. Then I need to make a decision. Silence. You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, he said, voice low. I'm not offering anything, she said. Not yet. But you're considering it. She nodded once. For the land, he asked. Or for you? She hesitated. That silence was longer. You're a good man, Caleb, she said. You work hard. You keep your word. You care for those boys like they're your whole world. They are. And you've helped breathe life back into this place, but we've known each other a week. He let out a slow breath. Yeah. I know. She looked down at the ground, then back up. I don't want to make this decision because I'm cornered. Neither do I. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. But Abby, if this leads somewhere, I don't want it to be because you have to. I want it to be because you choose to. Her throat tightened. I don't know what I'm choosing yet, she admitted. But I know I don't want to lose this place. And I don't want to lose what we've started. He gave a slow nod. Then let's fight it. Together. However we have to. She looked up at him, and for the first time since the dust had settled, she smiled. All right, she said. Let's start with proof of that this place is alive again. That evening, they walked the land together. They counted the hens, measured the yield from the back garden, checked the irrigation on the west side. Abby scribbled figures into a ledger. Caleb built a fence post repair checklist. They were building their case, not just for the court, but for themselves. Inside the house, the boys slept soundly in their cradle. The fire crackled with promise. Tomorrow, they would go into town, and if the rumors hadn't already reached the ears of the courthouse, they would soon. The fire had burned low by the time Caleb spoke those words. Abby sat still, pen frozen above her paper, the warmth from the hearth dancing across her fingers, but not quite reaching her chest. She looked at him slowly, like the words had landed from across some great distance, louder than thunder, quieter than breath. Caleb didn't flinch. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, back straight, elbows resting on the worn wood, like he'd finally placed something down. His eyes weren't demanding. They weren't pleading either. Just steady. Like a man who'd come to a conclusion and was ready to stand by it. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Not tonight." But the silence was already answering something inside her. She set the pen down. "You mean it, I do. You'd stand beside me. Even if it meant marrying someone you've only known a week," he nodded. "I've known enough people longer and trusted them less." That made her blink. Not because it was sweet, but because it was true. She leaned back, folding her arms, trying to get her breath back. "This isn't some storybook, Caleb. I'm not some lonesome widow waiting for a man to ride in and rescue her. I know that. You've rescued yourself more times than anyone ever will. Then why would you offer to tie yourself to a storm like me?" he smiled. "Because I don't think you're a storm, Abby. I think you're the place people crawl to after the storm's over." She let that sink in. And damn it, it sank deep. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The shutters groaned and a low whistle moved through the cracks in the old window panes. "I'm not saying yes," she said finally, "but I'm not saying no. That's enough for me." She watched him for a long moment. Then she stood. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long one." He nodded and stood too, pausing as he passed her. "Whatever happens in that courthouse, I won't walk away unless you ask me to." "I won't ask," she said quietly. And he left. The morning came cold and bright sunlight spilling across the plains in streaks of pale gold. Abby rose before the boys stirred, made coffee, packed a basket with bread, and laced up her boots like she was preparing for battle. She wore her mother's coat, thick black wool with carved bone buttons, and pinned her hair back tight. When she stepped onto the porch, Caleb was already there, saddlebag over one shoulder, papers tucked under one arm. The twins were wrapped and strapped into the back of the wagon, bundled tight, small faces peeking from between quilts. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said. "But we're going anyway." They rode in silence at first. The trail into town was rutted from last week's storm, and the wheels creaked under the weight of both the cargo and the moment. About halfway there, Abby broke the quiet. "You ever been married before?" Caleb glanced over. "No. Thought about it once. Years back. Before Sarah." Abby looked at him. "Sarah wasn't your wife." He shook his head. "She was the mother of my boys. We lived together. Planned to make it official after harvest. But she went into labor early." Abby didn't speak for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said eventually. "Me too." A moment passed. "I was engaged once," Abby said. "To a boy named Martin Bishop. He was kind. Simple. Too simple. My father liked him because he didn't ask questions. What happened, I asked too many." That made Caleb chuckle under his breath. "Sounds about right." They rode the rest of the way into town without another word, but the silence felt different this time. Shared. Not empty. The town of Cold Spring was small, but it had everything a Wyoming settlement needed: post office, saloon, general store, and a courthouse with walls so thin you could hear arguments through the clapboard siding. Abby parked the wagon outside and carried the twins in herself. Caleb walked beside her, documents in hand. Inside the courthouse, it smelled like dust ink and stale coffee. Miss Ethel was already there, seated in the back row with a bundle of papers on her lap. "You came," Abby said, surprised. "Didn't trust those weasels not to twist the truth," Ethel replied, standing. "And I thought you could use another voice." Caleb helped settle the boys in the back as Abby stepped forward to the front desk. The clerk raised his eyebrows. "Miss Monroe," he said too loudly. "You've come prepared." "I've come legal," she replied, "which is more than I can say for Virgil." At that, the side door opened, and in strode Virgil and Clyde, dressed like this was a funeral and a celebration all in one. Behind them was a man in a gray coat with papers in hand, clearly their lawyer. The judge entered last, an old man named Wallace who smelled like pipe smoke and didn't suffer fools quietly. They all sat. The proceedings began. For over an hour, Virgil's lawyer painted Abby as unstable, irresponsible, and reckless, unfit to manage the property on her own, having abandoned the traditional structure expected of a landowner per the clause in the deed. Then Abby stepped up, ledger in hand, voice calm and clear. She showed the judge her yield, her livestock count, her sales, her water records. Then she gestured toward Caleb. "He's not my husband, but he's worked beside me like one." Virgil scoffed. "So he's shacked up on your land. That doesn't make you respectable, it makes you a scandal." The judge silenced him with a look. Caleb rose slowly, stepping forward. "I didn't come here to take her land," he said. "I came to survive. I stayed because I found something worth more than survival." He turned to Abby. "I meant what I said. If the law needs a man beside her, then let it be me." The courtroom held its breath. The judge leaned back. "This isn't a marriage license hearing," he muttered. "But I'd be a damn fool not to recognize the intent." He looked over the paperwork, tapped his fingers, then said, "Miss Monroe, you've met the conditions of independent operation. The court sees no reason to transfer deed authority." Files closed. Abby didn't breathe until they were outside. When the door shut behind them, she stood still, eyes closed, sunlight on her face like a reward. "They'll keep trying," Caleb said softly. "Let them," she replied. She turned to him. "Come back with me." "You sure know," she said. "But I want to be." He reached for her hand, and for the first time she didn't pull away. The first snow fell soft and slow that night, dusting the windows and the porch rails like powdered sugar. Abby stood at the stove, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone lukewarm. The fire behind her snapped and hissed a steady song in a house that now felt like it had something breathing inside it again. In the cradle by the hearth, Levi stirred and whimpered. She moved to him instinctively, lifting him into her arms with the ease of someone who'd done it 100 times. She wasn't his mother, not by blood. But the way he sighed against her shoulder, it was like he didn't know that or didn't care. She swayed gently, her eyes drifting toward the open door that led to the spare bedroom. A faint glow spilled from beneath the frame, flickering like candlelight. Caleb was in there. Writing. He hadn't said much since they got back from the courthouse. He'd kissed Luke on the forehead, stacked wood by the fire, thanked her with quiet eyes. Then he'd slipped into the back room with a satchel and shut the door halfway. She'd left him space. He needed it. But it gnawed at her. After she laid Levi back down, she knocked gently. His voice came soft from inside. "Yeah." She pushed the door open. Caleb was seated at the small writing desk near the bed, pen in hand, a half-written letter in front of him. He looked up, not startled, but guarded. "I didn't mean to bother," she said. "You didn't." He gestured toward the only other chair. She sat folding her hands in her lap. For a while they listened to the quiet together. Then Abby said, "You writing someone back east? Not exactly." He folded the letter and set it aside. "It's something I've needed to do for a while." She studied him. "You said you had no family left." "I don't. Not the kind worth writing." She waited, knowing he'd fill the space when he was ready. Caleb exhaled. "I've got something I haven't told you. Not because I meant to lie. Just because I didn't know how." Abby's stomach tightened slightly, but she didn't move. "There's a difference between keeping secrets and not knowing how to speak them," she said. He met her eyes. "I appreciate you saying that, but I still need to tell you." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Back in Missouri, there was a man. Name was Merritt Doyle. Banker, landowner, powerful in a way that makes people stop asking questions." Abby nodded slowly. The kind of man her father had taught her to avoid. He wanted Sarah, Caleb said flatly. Made offers even after she turned him down. When she got pregnant, he spread talk, claimed the boys were his, said I'd taken her away to hide it. Abby felt her hands curl slowly into fists. I tried to ignore it. But then he came to our land, said he wanted a conversation. It turned into something else. He hit her. Caleb's voice broke, barely audible now. I hit back. Abby sat still. He fell. Cracked his skull on a rock. Died 2 days later. Silence. There was no trial, just rumor. His brother was sheriff. I grabbed what I could and ran. She let the words settle, heavy and raw. You think they're still looking for you, he nodded. I know they are. That's what the letter's about. To a lawyer in Cheyenne. I'm asking about extradition. If there's a case, if it's safe to stop running. Abby rubbed her thumb across the grain of the chair. That's why you never put down roots. Caleb nodded once. Because I didn't think I had the right. Abby studied him. Did Sarah ever tell you to run? He shook his head. She told me to protect the boys. That was the last thing she said. Abby stood slowly and crossed the room. She placed her hand on his shoulder, not to comfort, but to ground. You did, she said. You protected them. He looked up, eyes glassy but dry. And you need to know something, she continued. If they come, if someone comes looking, we don't run. Not unless we have to. He held her gaze. Even if it puts you in danger, I've been in danger plenty of times, Caleb. But this life we're building, it's worth standing still for. His breath caught slightly. I'm not afraid of your past, she said. I'm afraid of losing what we just started calling home. He reached up and covered her hand with his. Thank you, he said. She gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. Finish your letter, but know this, whatever comes of it, you're not alone anymore. He nodded, jaw tight. Abby stepped out of the room and closed the door gently behind her. The next day came thick with cloud and cold wind. Caleb worked the eastern fence while Abby tended to the livestock. Ethel rode by mid-morning with news from town. Virgil had gone quiet, licking his wounds after the courthouse loss. But folks were still talking. They say you two are, serious, Ethel said, sipping coffee in Abby's kitchen. We're building something, Abby replied carefully. I don't know what to call it yet. Ethel grunted. Well, let me know when you need someone to bake a cake. Abby smiled despite herself. Later, while the boys napped, Caleb showed Abby the letter. It's done, he said. I'm mailing it tomorrow. She read it, every word. It was measured, honest, brave. A confession and a defense in one. You're ready, she said. He shook his head. I'm terrified, but I want this fear to end. That night over dinner, they talked like people who'd stopped pretending to be strangers. About little things, books, music, old scars, childhood pets. Abby told him about her first horse. Caleb told her about Sarah's laugh. It was the kind of night where silence didn't mean distance. It meant comfort. Caleb didn't move right away. The man leaning against his wagon had the polished boots of a city man, a long black coat that didn't belong in any Wyoming dust storm, and a mustache waxed so sharp it could have drawn blood. He was clean in a way that looked like a threat, like not a speck of dirt dared touch him unless he allowed it. "You're Caleb Walker, right?" the man asked again, casually, inspecting the back wheel of the wagon, like he wasn't turning Caleb's insides to stone. Caleb nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" The man straightened and reached into his coat. For a half second, Caleb's heart jumped, but the man only pulled out a folded badge. "Detective Royce Keller, hired out of St. Louis. Private but legal." Caleb glanced at the badge, then back to Royce's face. "Private for who, brother of the deceased?" "Merritt Doyle." The name dropped like a stone into Caleb's gut. Royce didn't smile, but his mouth twitched like he'd wanted to. "You've got a quiet little setup out here, Mr. Walker. Cozy. Respectable. Even got the church ladies in your corner. But here's the thing. Folks back east didn't forget. Doyle's family certainly didn't." Caleb said nothing. His hands were loose at his sides, but his pulse pounded hard enough to shake his ribs. "I'm not here to cause a fuss," Royce said. "Not yet. No badge flashing in saloons, no dragging you out by the collar. I came to offer a choice." Caleb stared. Royce stepped closer. "Come back willingly. Face the inquiry. Get your name cleared or not. That part's on them. But if you cooperate, I keep the noise low. If you don't, I start making friends around town. People talk, Mr. Walker. People remember. You threatening me, I'm offering you a road that don't end in cuffs. You've got a woman. Kids. Don't make this uglier than it has to be." Caleb exhaled through his nose. "I need time." "You've got 3 days," Royce said. "I'll be staying at the inn. Room 2 upstairs. You come find me." He turned, tipped his hat, and walked off like he'd just asked Caleb to buy a newspaper. Caleb stood there long after he was gone. His hands shook just slightly. Not from fear, but from the familiar sick sense of something slipping out of his control. He looked at the post office behind him. The letter was already sent. But now the storm had arrived first. Back at the ranch, Abby felt the shift before she saw it. Caleb walked into the yard just before noon, a little slower than usual, like he was carrying something inside him he didn't want to spill. She met him at the porch, wiping flour off her hands. "You're late," she said, teasing, but the smile faded when she saw his face. "What happened?" He set the satchel down carefully. "We've got a visitor. From Missouri." Abby's shoulders stiffened. "Who?" "A private detective. Royce Keller. Hired by Doyle's family." Her breath caught, but she didn't flinch. "What does he want?" "For me to come back. Stand before a board. Maybe face charges. Maybe not." She nodded once, slow. "What did you say? I said I needed time." She stepped down to him. "And what do you want?" He looked at her, all defenses dropped. "I want to stay, but I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Abby's voice was soft but firm. "You didn't bring it. It followed you." Caleb dropped his gaze. I don't want Luke and Levi growing up with a father who's always looking over his shoulder. You think they won't see what kind of man you are if you leave?" He didn't answer. She reached out and took his hand. "You can't outrun the law, Caleb, but maybe we can outlast it." He blinked. "You'd really stand with me? I already am." She led him inside. The boys were napping again, the smell of bread rising in the oven. Caleb sat at the table while Abby poured water and sliced cheese. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "First we wait. Let him sweat a little. Let him see we're not scared." "I am scared," he admitted. "Me too," she said. "But fear ain't a stop sign. It's a warning. You pay attention, but you keep walking." They made a plan. That night, Ethel came by after supper. Abby told her everything. The older woman sat silent for a long time. "Well," she finally said, "I can stir the waters a bit. Let the judge know that detective's presence is raising questions about interference. Might not stop him, but it'll slow him." "Can you really do that?" Caleb asked. "I know people," Ethel said, "and some of them owe me favors." She left with a basket of bread and the fire of war behind her spectacles. The next morning, Abby rode into town alone. Caleb didn't want her to, but she insisted. At the general store, she bought Oates dried apples, 2 bolts of flannel, and a bottle of ink. Then she walked across the street and entered the inn. Upstairs, room 2. She knocked. Royce answered in his undershirt, suspenders hanging loose. "Miss Monroe," he said, amused. "Didn't expect you. I'm here for Caleb." "He send you no." "I sent myself." He stepped aside. She didn't enter. "Let me ask you something, detective," she said. "What do you think your client really wants justice?" "No," Abby said. "They want revenge, and they want silence. They want the one man who stood up to Merritt Doyle buried deep enough no one remembers." Royce's face hardened slightly. Walker doesn't deny the altercation, because he's not a liar, but he's not a murderer either. Royce leaned against the doorframe. "You've known him how long? Long enough to know the truth when I see it." Royce smirked. "This place, it's full of hard land and soft hearts. Makes people foolish." Abby's jaw clenched. "Then maybe you've stayed too long already." He watched her go, but he didn't stop her. That night, Caleb found Abby outside, arms wrapped tight around herself. "You were gone a long time," he said. "I went to see him." His face tensed. "Abby, I needed to see him for myself, hear how he talks, what he wants. And he's not here for justice, Caleb. He's here for a bounty." Caleb went still. "There's a bounty not official, but it's there, a quiet one. Doyle's brother wants you back alive or ruined." Caleb stared out into the dark. "I don't know how to fight something like that." "You don't fight it alone," she said. "You never did." He turned to her. She stepped closer. "You stay. We prepare. You've got legal footing now. I've got ties in town. We dig in. And if that's not enough, then we go. Together." His voice cracked. "You'd leave your land if it meant saving the people who've made it home, yes." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't deserve you." "No," she whispered. "But you do belong here." They stood there as the wind picked up, rattling the barn door in the distance. Tomorrow Royce would start sniffing louder. But tonight they had firelight. And each other. The flames roared like an open mouth. By the time Abby burst out, the front door rifle in hand, the barn was already half gone. Orange light licked at the night sky, flaring against the snow like the world had turned upside down. Smoke billowed into the stars, thick and choking. She didn't think she ran. Caleb came pounding across the yard from the bunkhouse, half-dressed, hair damp with sleep. He shouted something, but she didn't hear it through the roar. All she could think was the goats, the feed, the tools, the boy's future burning down one beam at a time. They met halfway. "I checked the house. Luke and Levi are safe," he shouted, grabbing her arm. "You can't go in. The animals." "It's too late, Abby." The roof gave way with a sickening crack, collapsing into itself in a burst of heat and sparks. Abby screamed, raw and furious, not with grief, but with rage. "They did this," she hissed. "That bastard sent someone." Caleb didn't argue. He just pulled her back from the searing heat, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, as if he could shield her from more than just the fire. "They don't burn barns to send messages," she growled, tears cutting through ash on her cheeks. "They burn them to erase proof." Caleb pulled back, staring at her. "Our records," he said. She nodded grimly. "All our notes. Crop counts. Seed tallies. Gone." They stood there watching the fire devour everything they'd built, the blaze swallowing beams and leather tools and hay, until there was nothing left but red-hot ruin. When the flames finally began to die down, the wind shifting what remained into smoke and glowing cinders, Abby turned toward the house. "I want him gone," she said. "Royce, I want him out of this town." Caleb didn't move. "You think he did it himself?" "No," she said. "He's too slick to smell like smoke. But he ordered it. Or he let someone else think they were doing him a favor." They walked back to the porch in silence. Inside, the twins were still sleeping unaware, blissfully untouched by the destruction outside. But the house smelled like loss. Abby sat down at the kitchen table, still in her boots, ash streaked across her face. Caleb poured her a glass of water, then sat across from her, staring at the table. "I should have left," he said. She looked up sharply. "Don't say that. They're targeting you now. Because of me." She slammed her palm on the table. "No. Because they want power. Because they think I'm weak. You didn't bring that. You're just the excuse they're hiding behind. But it's still burning because of me." "No," she said, quieter now. "It's burning because they're afraid, and cowards burn what they can't steal." He let that settle. Then she stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out the last 2 jars of honey she'd been saving. "I need to ride into town at first light," she said. "Talk to the judge. Talk to Sheriff Thorne. This can't be ignored." Caleb nodded. "I'll come with you." "No. You stay with the boys. They need one of us close." He hesitated. "I'll be fine," she said. "I'm mad enough not to be scared." But they both knew better. Dawn broke slow and gray, the sky thick with smoke haze. Abby saddled the mule herself. Her horse had been in the barn. The smell of burnt pine clung to everything. Ethel met her at the crossroads, riding hard. "Jesus," the old woman muttered when she saw the smoke. "It really happened." "They wanted proof gone," Abby said. "They'll want more than that next time." Abby tightened the reins. "Then they'll find a different kind of fire waiting." They rode into town together. The sheriff's office was quiet when they arrived. Sheriff Thorne, a lean, red-faced man, with a limp and a long memory, met them on the steps. "I heard," he said. "Was on my way out there next." "You won't find much but ashes," Abby said. "And tracks, maybe." Thorne nodded, rubbing his jaw. "I'll take a look. But you know how it works, Abby. No witnesses, no names." "Royce Keller," she cut in. "He's the only thing that's changed in weeks. He's the match." Thorne frowned. "He's got papers, Abby. Legal ones. He hasn't broken a law. He doesn't have to. He just talks in shadows and lets others do the burning. Ethel stepped forward. Then charge whoever lit the match. You let one barn burn without justice, and the next fire will be a house. Thorne looked between them and sighed. All right. I'll dig. But it's going to take more than smoke and fury to hold this. Then we'll bring more, Abby said. They didn't go to Royce directly. Not yet. Instead, they made noise. Ethel whispered to the preacher's wife. Abby spoke with the feed store owner. Thorne asked questions down at the saloon. By sundown, half the town was talking. About the fire. About Doyle's money. About the man in the black coat, staying just long enough to leave a scorch mark. That night back at the ranch, Caleb chopped the remains of the fence post for firewood. He moved like a man who'd been punched and hadn't felt it yet. Abby came out with 2 mugs and stood beside him. They're listening, she said. Caleb didn't answer. I know you want to run, I don't, he said. But I'm tired of hiding. She set a hand on his back. Then let them come, she said. Let them see what kind of man you are. He turned to her slowly. I'm not sure that's enough. It is, she said. Because I'm still here. And I see you. He breathed in deep. The night air was cold and clean, finally clearing of smoke. Inside, Luke cried once and Caleb went to him. No hesitation. Just love. Abby watched through the doorway, her heart a knot of hope and fear. Outside in the dark, a figure watched the house from the tree line. Not Royce, but someone worse. The envelope was hand-delivered. No stamps. No return name. Just a wax seal pressed into black paper, like it was dipped straight from hell's mouth. The sheriff's deputy found it hanging on the door of the courthouse, nailed there with a rusted horseshoe nail. Inside, written in clean, practiced strokes, the past is due. Bring Caleb Walker, or we'll come collect. Sheriff Thorne read it twice before folding it up and riding out to the Monroe Ranch with a face like stone. Abby met him halfway down the lane. The look on his face told her everything. They're not hiding anymore, he said, handing her the letter. She read it once, jaw tightening with every word. You think Royce left it? Thorne shook his head. His handwriting don't match, and he's too careful to be this loud. This is someone else. Someone sent by Doyle's family. Maybe. Or someone who just wants a piece of the fire. She exhaled, folding the letter back into its envelope. What now? Now you tell Caleb, and you both decide how much you're willing to bleed for this land. He was in the field behind the barn ruins, hauling charred beams into a new pile. His shirt was soaked with sweat, arms streaked in soot. He didn't look up when Abby approached. She stood in silence until he turned. What is it? She held out the letter. He took it, opened it, read it, and didn't move. When he finally looked at her, that his face was unreadable. Not fear, not anger, just something hollow and deep. They're coming, she said. I know. They want you. They always did. She stepped closer. You don't have to face this alone. I've been facing it alone for years. Well, that's over now. He turned away, tossing another beam onto the pile. You don't understand, Abby. Then make me understand. He stopped, hands on his hips, breath ragged. Merritt Doyle wasn't just a land baron. He ran rail. He owned half the county. He paid men to make problems disappear. And I was a problem. You were defending Sarah. Doesn't matter. To them, she was property. I stole her. I ruined her. And now they want payment. Abby stepped in front of him, forcing his eyes back to hers. Some debts ain't measured in dollars, Caleb. Some are paid in blood or silence. He swallowed. Exactly. So what are you gonna do? Bleed or go quiet? He looked down at her, broken and brave. I don't know. We'll figure it out, she snapped. Because we're not just standing still anymore. We're not waiting for wolves on the porch. He stared at her for a long time, then nodded once. I'll go to town. I'll speak to Thorn. We'll make a plan. You better, she said, because I'll be damned if I'm burying another part of this ranch. In town, Royce Keller was waiting on the saloon porch, legs crossed, sipping coffee like a man without a deadline. He watched Caleb ride in and didn't even blink. Morning, Royce said. Caleb ignored him. At the sheriff's office, Thorn had laid the letter on his desk. Ethel stood in the corner, arms crossed. Same seal showed up on my barn 3 years ago, she said. Different name, same message. You didn't tell anyone, Caleb said. I didn't have anyone to tell, she replied. And I didn't want to scare Abby. You think this is a gang? I think it's worse, Thorn said. This is legacy. A name passed down like a sickness. Doyle's family doesn't just punish people, they erase them. Caleb sat down heavily. So what do we do? We use the law, what little of it we can trust, Ethel said. We draw them out, get eyes, witnesses, and if they come guns drawn, then we do the same. Caleb shook his head. There are kids on that ranch. I know, Thorn said, and I don't want a war. But if they force one, we won't be the ones to blink. That night, Abby sat by the fire holding Luke in one arm and a rifle across her lap. Caleb sat across from her, staring into the flames. Do you regret it? She asked. He looked up. What, coming here? Letting yourself believe this could be a home? He leaned forward, the elbows on knees. Every day, and not once. She smiled a little. You speak in riddles. No, he said. Just truth. He stood, walked to her and kissed her forehead. If they come, he said softly, I won't run. I'll stand. And I'll stand beside you. Outside, the wind howled against the walls. Somewhere in the trees, a coyote called. But inside, the fire held steady. The next day, word spread. Someone had found a second letter. Tacked to the church door this time. Same seal. Same hand. This one read, You were warned. Last chance. Bring Caleb, or the house burns next. Thorn held the paper with tongs. This ain't just a threat anymore. It's a promise. Ethel nodded grimly. Then we break it before it's kept. They made a plan. That night, Caleb and Abby dug a trench around the house. Thorn stationed 2 deputies in the barn ruins. Ethel brought lanterns and hid them under brush to reveal intruders from a distance. They slept in shifts. Abby by the boys. Caleb on the porch with a shotgun. No one came. But the silence felt tighter than footsteps. The hoofbeats thundered louder with each second, shaking the frost loose from the windows, making the ground hum beneath Abby's boots. She stood on the porch, rifle slung tight in her hands. Caleb beside her, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the tree line where the riders emerged. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows behind them. Black coats, red scarves, and horses that looked bred for endurance more than speed. They moved like they weren't in a hurry, like they expected everyone to clear the way. Abby didn't move. If they came looking for surrender, she muttered they picked the wrong porch. Caleb didn't speak. He just planted his feet, shotgun firm in his grip. Behind them inside the house, Ethel held a rifle from the upstairs window and Thorne's two deputies crouched low behind the barn ruins, hidden and waiting. The lead rider slowed as he reached the edge of the clearing. He was young, mid-20s maybe, but his eyes were cold and flat. He wore no badge, no emblem, nothing to say who he rode for. Just the red scarf, the universal color of a threat. He tipped his hat slightly and called out, "Caleb Walker." Caleb didn't answer. The man smirked, amused. "You're a hard man to find." "You found me," Caleb said, voice steady. The man gestured lazily toward the others. "We've come to take you back. Quietly, if you cooperate. Loud, if you don't." Abby stepped forward. "You got papers? Orders, warrants?" The man's smile vanished. "Don't need 'em." "Then you're not law." Abby snapped. "You're a gang with clean boots." One of the riders shifted in the saddle. His hand twitched near the revolver at his hip. "Don't," Caleb said sharply. The man paused. Then the leader dismounted slowly and stepped forward. "You think this place gives you power?" he asked. "You think you can hide behind a woman and a few tin stars?" "I'm not hiding," Caleb said. "I'm home." The leader tilted his head. "Funny," he said, "because everything behind you looks flammable." Abby's voice turned to steel. "You light one match, and I'll send you back in a box." There was a moment tense and tight where it felt like the world held its breath. Then came the click, the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked from behind the tree line. The riders turned sharply. Sheriff Thorne stepped out from cover, rifle aimed and eyes cold. "Surprise," he said. From the other side, Ethel emerged from the orchard with a shotgun resting across her shoulder like she'd just stepped out of church. The leader glanced around, calculating. "This isn't over," he said. "You think a couple rifles'll stop what's coming?" Abby walked down the steps, stopping at the edge of the porch. "No," she said, "but it'll slow it down long enough for the law to catch up." The man smirked again. Then he whistled. The riders turned and, in a show of forced control, backed their horses away. They didn't run, but they left. That was more dangerous, because it meant they still believed they'd win. After they disappeared down the road, Thorne joined Caleb and Abby on the porch. "They're not finished," the sheriff said. "That was just an introduction." "We can't live like this," Abby said, "with rifles at the window and smoke in the wind." "No," Caleb agreed. "We finish it, one way or another." Thorne nodded slowly. "There's a federal marshal passing through Sheridan. I'll wire him. He won't come for one barn. But for threats, extortion, armed riders, that's different." Abby looked out toward the road. "And what if they come before help does?" "Then we hold," Caleb said. "Same as we've always done." That night, no one slept deeply. Caleb sat by the door with a shotgun across his lap, eyes watching the darkness. Abby tried to rest beside the boys, but her dreams were filled with fire and hoofbeats, voices calling her name from smoke. When morning came, it brought silence. Too much of it. The first shot cracked the stillness wide open. It came from the south by the fence line. Then a second. Then a third. Abby grabbed her rifle and ran. Caleb was already outside, sprinting toward the barn ruins where the deputies had taken watch. One of them, Jasper, was limping back, bleeding from his arm. "They came from the creek bed," he shouted. 5, maybe 6, tried to circle around. Abby dropped beside the fence rifle, up scanning. She saw one red scarf moving low along the ridge. She fired. Missed. But it sent him diving. From the window, Ethel fired a warning shot that split a branch above another rider's head. Thorne barked orders, moving from cover to cover. Then Caleb ran straight into the fray. "Get back," Abby screamed. "I'm not letting them push closer." He ducked low behind a rock pile, laying down cover fire. For 20 minutes, the ranch became a war zone. Smoke, shouting hooves lead flying through air that used to hold birdsong and dust. Then came a cry from inside the house. "Luke." Abby's heart stopped. She ran bolting inside, throwing open the bedroom door. The boy was crying, but safe. Someone had tried the back entrance. The door bore fresh gouges like it had been kicked or pried. They'd wanted more than just Caleb. They'd wanted to take. She carried Luke to the kitchen, bracing the back door, grabbing Levi in her other arm. Caleb burst in a moment later. "They're pulling back," he gasped. "For now." She stared at him, breath ragged. "This isn't a warning anymore," she said. "It's a siege." He nodded, and behind them Thorn entered, covered in dust and sweat. "They'll be back," he said. "At night, maybe with more." Caleb looked to Abby. "This ends now," he said. "Tomorrow I ride to town. I speak to Royce. I end it." "No," she said. "We ride together." Snow fell again that morning. Soft and silent, the flakes came in slow spirals, barely touching the blood-stained ground before vanishing. Smoke still curled from the edge of the barn ruins, where the last fire had finally gone out. The world was quiet, in the way it only is, after something terrible has finished happening. Caleb stood on the porch, boots blackened with soot, knuckles-torn shotgun still resting in the crook of his arm. He didn't feel victorious, but he was alive. Behind him inside the house, Abby held the twins. Levi whimpered in his sleep. Luke coughed once, then nestled deeper into her shoulder. They hadn't seen the worst of it, but they'd heard the chaos through the walls. Their childhood would carry echoes of gunfire, even if no one ever spoke of it. Ethel sat by the fire, bruised but breathing. One of Thorne's deputies was dead. The other, Jasper, had a shattered leg. He'd tried to crawl to his horse to draw fire away from the house. He'd bought them just enough time. Sheriff Thorne had taken 2 bullets, one to the shoulder, one to the thigh. He was laid up in Abby's guest room, gritting through the pain with nothing but whiskey and cloth soaked in snowmelt. And Royce Keller was gone. Caleb had found him at dawn, tied and unconscious, left near the crossroads, like trash someone no longer needed. The Red Scarf Gang had used him as a shield, then abandoned him when the shooting got too hot. Caleb hadn't untied him. He'd left him there cold and waiting for a train back to Missouri. Because there was nothing left for Royce here. The ones who came with fire and threats were dead or fled. Their blood stained the edges of the Monroe property, and their names would never be spoken with honor. Abby stepped onto the porch beside Caleb. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "How's Thorne?" he asked. "Sleeping." Finally. They stood in silence a moment. "You gonna tell the boys about this someday?" he asked. "I'll tell them what matters," she said. That their mama and a few stubborn folks stood their ground. He looked out across the land, over the blackened fields, the frozen creek, the shattered fencing. "We lost a lot," he said. "We did, but it's still ours." She nodded. "Because we didn't give it away." Caleb turned to her. "I don't want to leave." "You don't have to. I mean ever. I know." She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. "You don't have to say anything else," she murmured. "We already said it with every step we didn't back down." The spring came slower that year, but it came. They rebuilt the barn, smaller than before, but stronger. Jasper stayed on even after his leg healed poorly. said the land deserved one more watchman. Ethel wrote a long letter to the governor and never got a reply, but she smiled as if she had. Sheriff Thorne never walked the same again, but he kept his badge. Folks started calling him Old Iron, and Caleb Walker stayed. He put in fence posts. He planted oats. He helped raise 2 boys that weren't his by blood, but grew to call him father without being told to. He held Abby's hand under the stars and whispered her name into her shoulder like it was a prayer. And he never once looked back east. Years later, someone from town asked Abby why they'd fought so hard. You could have sold, they said. Moved somewhere easier. Started fresh. She just smiled. Because home isn't a place you buy, she said. It's the place you bleed for. One night after supper, Caleb sat on the porch alone while the house behind him filled with the soft sounds of music and children's laughter. The wind picked up across the fields. He looked out toward the tree line. Not afraid. Just remembering. He took a slow breath and said quietly to himself, "The only past that matters is the one we choose to build from." Then he stood turned back toward the house and walked inside.